Today, we discuss Miro. Listen, when it comes to running client workshops, the dream, of course, is to get those creative juices flowing, right? But typically what ends up happening is thousands of hours get wasted because of poorly facilitated meetings. So I have Maya with me today. She's a consultant who runs Fortune 100 workshops, from leadership training to team building, and she has the insider tip on what makes things work. Maya?
Thank you, Jason. I've been doing this a long time. My number one tip is to bring everyone into that visual collaboration platform. So personally, I use Miro, and it's completely changed how I interact with the room. You have to give people a way to feel like they're in the room even when they're not. That's something you can do easily in Miro. Otherwise, they've seen the same slides and format 1,000 times.
Falling asleep, eyes glazing over, yawns, all that.
Exactly. When people follow me on the Miro board, everyone is literally going on a journey with me. We're adding thoughts, we're reacting, and we're voting for the best ideas. It's great.
Connective magic. I like it. That's MIRO.com.
Welcome to the future of legal THC, Mood's THCA flower. It's the most potent breakthrough in the world of federally legal cannabis. And now you have 10 high-inducing strains of this smokable flower to choose from at HelloMood.com, the best online dispensary that ships discreetly to your door. Great for beginner and veteran users, the experts at Mood have tailored different strains for curated moods. From euphoric and energized to creative and focused, Mood delivers the highest quality THC products you can trust. However you like to take THC, Mood enhances awe-inspiring experiences with versatile products that go with whatever mood you're ready for, like their great-tasting gummies, convenient pre-rolls, classic flower, and so much more. Try Mood's new THCA flower today, and for 20% off your first order, plus a free pre-roll of THCA flower, go to HelloMood.com and use promo code PODCAST20. That's HelloMood.com, promo code PODCAST20, for 20% off your order and a free THCA pre-roll.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome into the JMU Sports News Podcast. My name's Jack Fitzpatrick. I'll be joined by Daniel Merriman, and here in just a second, we are Bennett Conlin-less tonight as he has run away from us. It's like a parent left us home alone and we have to figure out for ourselves. But we're doing it. It's me. It's Daniel. We'll be diving into all things Georgia Southern week. We got a couple great guests on tap tonight as well, bringing in Kelly Ford, who, if you're on Twitter, we've been retweeting a bunch. They have a bunch of awesome data sets that they're sending out there, so we'll break down that a little bit. We're welcoming in Brian Stone in a little bit as well to go over that Georgia Southern matchup. But before we dive into all of that, just a reminder that we are presented by BetOnline, and we're presented by Three Notched Beer as well. Minute Man Mondays, $3 Minute Man pours. You do not want to miss out on that. Three Notched has locations in Harrisonburg, Charlottesville, Roanoke, Virginia Beach, Richmond, and out in Nelson County as well, around the area where Devil's Backbone and everything like that is. You want to check them out wherever you are in the state of Virginia. And wherever you are, they got First Tap Fridays at the Harrisonburg Valley Collab House. They're dropping a new beer each and every Friday. And each and every Friday, that new beer is discounted, so you can give it a try. And while you're there, sign up for the Fresh Beer Club, an awesome membership that Three Notched offers. Another awesome thing that we have for you guys is BetOnline. Football's back, and BetOnline is your number one source for all of your sports wagering info with all the up-to-the-minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football, all right at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way to the postseason, BetOnline gives you access to the best football promotions and contests available anywhere online. So head to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's promo code BLEAV, to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. So throw a $100 first-time deposit in there. They'll hook you up with a $50 bet credit to experience BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts and where life starts, your next chapter, wherever it may take you, it starts with Christopher William Jewelers.
There's a reason Christopher William Jewelers has been voted Best of Virginia year after year. It's not just one thing that sets us apart. It's everything. It's the selection, extensive and unmatched, with every engagement ring, loose diamond, and fashion jewelry chosen for quality and brilliance. It's the service. From our diamond experts to our master goldsmith, our team shares a passion for what they do, and it shows. It's the atmosphere, both glamorous and laid back. See for yourself why people can't stop talking about Christopher William Jewelers in Harrisonburg and Weir's Cave.
Daniel, welcome into the podcast. So I'm pumped to have you. I will say right off the jump, though, you changed your on me within the last 48 hours, it seems.
I don't believe it was the last 48 hours. I took a look after the podcast and my mom asked me, why does it say Daniel TFXC? And I went, oh, that's because when I started this Twitter account, it was for recruiting for track and field and cross country for myself. So had that as an ending, and I went, well, I should probably take that off. And I didn't realize you could change your X username. So yeah, it has changed, and it is now just my full name with an underscore. Pretty easy to remember.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. So we got a jam-packed episode on tap today. We got two guests coming on we're going to talk to. I'm pumped about both of them. We got a lot to cover when it comes to this Georgia Southern game. So I guess we'll just kind of dive in right from the jump, throwing you right into the deep end. We got the three-notched weekly preview as Georgia Southern comes to town. This is a team led by Clay Helton. They have one of the most prolific offenses when it comes to just pure stats-wise. Now, I'll get into EPA in a little bit, as that's one of my favorite things to talk about. But just from a pure stats perspective, this Georgia Southern offense should shred JMU. Defensively, though, JMU should have their opportunities to counter. Last year, these two teams met down in Statesboro, and Georgia Southern came away with the win. They took down number 25 JMU. Just so happened that JMU was taking an undefeated record off of a bye week into that game. Seems very similar to this year. Daniel, off the jump, what are you expecting out of this game on Saturday?
I'm expecting a show through the air. I think the primary focus for both of these teams, especially Georgia Southern, has been the pass attack. I mean, look at Davis Britton, who is a transfer from Tulsa, has had a lot of good throws this year. And outside of the Wisconsin game where he has an absurd, I believe it's 4 interceptions. Outside of that, he hasn't turned the ball over the past 3 games. He's a really, really steady QB that can put the ball wherever you need it. So I think that this game is going to be a very pass-heavy attack from both sides. JMU has spoken extensively about how they want their pass game to be better, not to say it hasn't been good already, but there's definitely both improvement and willingness to throw the ball on both sides coming into this game. So I would expect it to be at least somewhat high scoring. I think that there will be a pretty hefty overbid, whoever's betting for this game.
Yeah, call me crazy. So for this game, I kind of expect JMU secondary to show up. I know that sounds weird. I don't think Georgia Southern will move the ball. And someone clip this and play it back for me on Saturday at 4 p.m. when JMU loses a 45-38 slugfest through the air, over 1,000 yards through the air last year. Watch that happen again after I'm about to say all of this. But Georgia Southern, they're good through the air. Their numbers are great. But at an EPA, an expected points added, they're not as good as JMU. JMU is better passing this season on the offensive side of the ball than Georgia Southern is. Georgia Southern, the reason why they have these just absolutely gaudy numbers, they throw it on average 50 times a game. That's the most in the entire nation. So from an efficiency metric, they're actually not as good as I think we all are kind of hyping them up to be. Now, they are good. Don't get me wrong, but am I crazy for thinking the secondary might actually have its best game of the season?
I think the secondary is going to face challenges on the outside, but I think they're going to be very well prepared for them. This bye week, in addition with some of the new personnel that's been rotated in for the secondary for JMU, has shown a lot of promise. I know we've seen D'Angelo Pons really putting his hands in the passing lanes, and then Chauncey Logan, who's been a cornerback one for not only his freshman, but now his sophomore season as well. There is now starting to get some continuity, some real promise in that secondary. The thing that I do worry about is these receivers for Georgia Southern are damn good. Caleb Hood, Derwin Burgess, Queely, who's had 3 touchdowns as well. They're just anywhere you want it, anywhere you can get it, that ball is going to get spread around, and it's going to find the hands of their best receivers.
Yeah.
I like the EPA stat that you had in beforehand about their efficiency within passing. I'd like to counter it a little bit, though. I believe,
Hit me.
and this is just on eye test, JMU is more consistently explosive, whereas I believe Georgia Southern is
Yes.
more consistently, let's make the right play. I think
Yeah,
that there's
so
a little bit more of the check down game that Georgia Southern utilizes better than JMU in the past.
That's a great point. Georgia Southern really likes the quick passing game. They're going to hit you quick, maybe slants, the bubble screens, get it out of the hands of Davis Brin quickly, not necessarily the 75-yard after catch explosive play. However, both of these teams have a very similar success rate. So the success rate for Georgia Southern when passing is 47.8%. Success rate for JMU is 46.5%. So when you see that type of success rate with kind of a higher EPA, a good scoring team that's telling you they do get a good amount of explosives. But like you said, Georgia Southern doesn't rely on them as much. And I'm going to go out on a limb and probably say that Georgia Southern plays a full 4 quarters of football, and their quarterback play doesn't fall off an entire cliff in the 3rd quarter. That's a hunch. That's just a hunch. But
just a little bit of a guess.
Yeah, you make a good point. And that those receivers this season, Caleb Hood catches 91% of his targets this year. There's only been 4 passes he hasn't caught. Derwin Burgess, he's caught 92% of his passes. And Anthony Queely, 95% of their passes. All of them have over 200 yards this season. All of them have 3 touchdowns. Just an absurd level of productivity from their 3 main guys.
For that offense to have been triple option just 2 years ago is hilarious to me. These receivers are so good. I mean, everywhere you go, you see that they're setting program records, especially Caleb Hood at the top. He's truly been an excellent receiver for them. If he's not on an all-conference first or second team, I would be stunned. He's played phenomenally this year.
It is kind of hilarious. There was a question in the roundtable this week Bennett put to me, and it was, is Clay Helton one of the best coaches in the entire Sun Belt? And it's just like, yeah, this was, like you said, this was a triple option team 2 years ago. He comes in the first year with Kyle Van Treese, gets him, I forgot where he even got him to transfer in from, Buffalo, I want to say, something like that. Brings him in and then just lets him run, like just throws so much, just absolutely throws everywhere. Then this year, Davis Brin doing the same. And this was a team that just ran the heck out of the ball for a few years beforehand. But we'll continue really diving in. What was
crazy. That? I said just craziness.
Yeah.
Especially considering now they have a 48.53% third down conversion rate. That does not exist in a triple option system. Like, you either are going to get it every single time, or you're going to get stopped at the line. And with JMU's run defense, that would have been not even a contest. Yeah. But to have that increased compared to years past, Clay Helton has really turned this squad around.
Yeah. We'll dive a little bit more into Georgia Southern throughout the podcast. This is all about Georgia Southern. There's no game to recap because it was the bye week. But for now, we're joined by Kelly Ford from thelines.com. He joins us. He always has some fantastic data, some fantastic insights, and I've really enjoyed seeing you pop up on my Twitter feed more and more. Kelly, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming on. So I guess just from the jump, if you can kind of explain to the listeners what you do on Twitter, because it's a lot of data, it's a lot of numbers. So just kind of like a quick synopsis, too long didn't read type of thing for the listeners.
Yeah, for sure. The too long didn't read is I make people mad on Twitter. That's essentially what I do.
So do we.
Right? No. So in all seriousness, what I do with the K Ford ratings is really twofold. One, I have the power ratings. So that is a predictive model algorithm that I've created, very similar to, what Bill Connolly's SP Plus or Brian Fremeau's FEI, ESPN's FPI, any of those predictive power rating models that are out there. That's what the K Ford ratings is too. It's trying to project forward and say, okay, who would be favored against who on a neutral field if these teams played tomorrow? From those power ratings, I'm able to generate all sorts of different fun, in my opinion, things that go along with college football. So the most deserving resume rankings. I'm able to kind of look at every single team's schedule through a common lens and say, okay, how would the average top 25 team be expected to do against this schedule? And if you've done better than that, you're going to be up there in the most deserving. If you've done worse than that, then you're going to fall down in those rankings, right? And so the resume rankings are arguably my favorite thing that I do with the ratings. Again, I need the ratings to serve as the engine for that. James Madison, you guys will be happy to know, currently number 20 in my most deserving rankings. I mean, if I'm an AP voter, I'm voting for James Madison. I'm not, of course. I'm voting for James Madison because what the Dukes have been able to do this year against their schedule relative to what would be expected of the average top 25 team has been impressive. I can dive more into what that means and what I mean by that if you guys want. Other things that I do, though, projected conference standings. So basically, let's simulate the rest of the year using the current power ratings. Where do these teams end up? What % chance do they have of winning 5, 6, 7, 8 games in the conference? What % chance do they have to win 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games in the regular season? Right now, I have JMU with a 4% chance to finish the year 12-0. Also, on top of that, I've started doing game leverage stuff. So, hey, this game this weekend, what does it mean? The JMU Georgia Southern game. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any Sun Belt championship game leverage for James Madison since the Dukes are ineligible, but this is a huge game for Georgia Southern, right? If they win this game, they have a 55% chance to win the Sun Belt East. If they lose it, it drops all the way down to a 34% chance. So that's another thing I'm able to do. We track on who's overachieving, underachieving relative to preseason expectations. There's all sorts of fun stuff that I do on the website, k4ratings.com, but it's all driven by the power ratings.
Dope. I know you
really impressive stuff with your stats. I know you've posted several times to Twitter and to much outrage of plenty of different fans. But how do you, as a, again, unbiased, removed third party that just is presenting statistics, kind of like sit back and look at these fan bases and go, wow, they really don't know it's just numbers. They're getting angry at me of all people. What fan bases do you find the most fun to interact with? Obviously, the Dukes have shown you some love recently, but
yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, JMU fans have been fun recently. You guys are newer to FBS still. So when I started doing this, James Madison was not an FBS program. I've now, of course, created my FCS Lite model, so that helps me better approximate the team strengths of FCS teams. But when James Madison was FCS, I didn't do that. I didn't have that. So I'm newer to the James Madison fan base. There are some out there. The Utah fan base seems to be pretty good. You know, they like when you pump up their team and they don't get too mad when you say things that aren't as nice about their team, or when the numbers say things that aren't as nice. Tennessee, surprisingly, people are like, wow, that Tennessee fan base, there's no way. They're actually pretty good sports about it for the most part. Again, for the most part. But then there are others who, you know, maybe not as friendly or not as nice, or don't understand as much about what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to accomplish. People don't understand. It's not personal. Like, sometimes my favorite team doesn't come out smelling like roses in the model. Sometimes it does. Like, I'm not bringing any Kelly Ford the person spin here. It's just what the model says, and that's how we do it. But there's a handful of good fan bases out there that are fun. And guys, I'll be honest, when I first started on Twitter, 5-6 years ago now, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, I tried to respond to everybody and react to everybody. Hey, they've got a question or they're yelling at me, but they don't understand. Let me explain it. I've moved past that. People don't want to understand. So if someone asks a genuine question and I do have time to respond, I certainly will do that. But those that are just kind of yelling and screaming, oh, this sucks. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, your math is wrong. Like, thank you. I appreciate it. Mute and I move on. Yeah. So it's been fun.
Yeah. You just dropped something earlier today, the net wins in one possession in overtime games. The What If Wednesday, I think you call it. One of my favorite things that you do, JMU leads everything, every team in the nation, with 4 of their 5 wins this season coming by one possession / overtime, but none of them have been to overtime, just all one possession games. So just all of their FBS wins have just so happened to come that way. When that's factoring into the overall numbers, does that hurt a team? Does it bring it down? Because honestly, I was kind of shocked that the ratings had JMU as high as 20th when they have that many one possession wins.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's twofold there. From a power rating standpoint, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're winning by one possession if the opponents that you're playing are really, really strong. Now, if they're not, basically going into a game, the model has an expectation of your team and of your opponent based on all this data that I'm putting into the back end of the model. If you perform in the game, and it's not about wins and losses for the power rating model, it's about how did you play. If your team exceeds the expectation that the model had for you in that game, your power rating will rise. It will get better. If you fall short of the expectation of the model, even if you win the game, if you fall short of the expectation in terms of your performance, your power rating will fall. So it doesn't necessarily matter the win or loss for the ratings. It's all about how did you play relative to expectations. Now, that's how James Madison, for right now, for me, they're power rated number 62 in the country. They're 69th offense. They're 52nd defense. I mean, it's pretty darn good for a G5 program that's only been FBS now for year two. So all of that aside, from a ranking standpoint, yes, you do get punished a little bit if you don't beat teams by as much as the model is expecting the average top 25 team to beat these teams by. Now you're winning games, and that's more important, but it's twofold with the most deserving. It's how have you done against your schedule relative to expected with regard to win-loss? That's what I call record achievement. And then how have you done against your schedule relative to expected with scoring margin? So that's my relative scoring margin. For James Madison, right now, you guys are number 17 in the record achievement component, which is the bigger component of the two. At the end of the day, it should matter more. What is your record and what is your record relative to expected? Because we know, no offense to JMU, we know 12-0 in the Sun Belt is not 12-0 in the SEC, right?
Yes.
So we have to normalize that schedule, and we do that on the back end. But it's only a 62% chance the average top 25 team would be 5-0 against JMU's schedule so far. That's really good. That's number 17 in the country. Wow. I said JMU's number 20 though. So, Kelly, you said they're number 17. Why are they number 20? Because their relative scoring margin is dragging them down a little bit. Yes, winning these games by one score, the average top 25 team would be expected to beat these teams by much more than one score. JMU's relative scoring margin is minus 15.2. That means the average top 25 team would be beating James Madison's opponents by 15.2 points per game more than James Madison is beating those opponents. So that relative scoring margin ranks number 64. Again, you're 17 in record achievement, you're 20 overall, and you're 64 in the relative scoring margin. That's because the relative scoring margin is weighted significantly less than the record achievement. But I do think it's important to include that in there, because if you and I beat the exact same, if we play the exact same schedule, and I beat that schedule by an average of 50 points a game, and you beat that schedule by an average of 1 point a game, but we both end up 12-0, well, I'm more deserving because I beat the same teams you beat, and I beat them by 7 touchdowns more, right? So that, to me, is why it's important to incorporate that. ESPN strength of record is the same thing as my record achievement, but ESPN strength of record doesn't incorporate anything beyond just who have you beaten, how have you beaten, who have you beaten, and how would the average top 25 team by FPI be expected to have performed against that schedule. I think incorporating the relative scoring margin is really important.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the Dukes have just gotten the nickname Cardiac Dukes for a reason. We don't like to win a game by more than a possession. And at this point, I think our biggest margin of victory is 8 against South Alabama of FBS teams. Bucknell was a little different. But crazy to think that we've gotten away with it this much and this early into the season with one possession games.
Look, I mean, if you stop the game after 30 minutes, I think JMU's would probably be number one in every aspect. I mean, I think they're a national champion contender after 30 minutes of football. But unfortunately, you have to play an additional 30 minutes, of course.
Yeah, no, our second half offense is not our forte.
Yeah. Well, looking ahead to this Georgia Southern game, I know you mentioned a little bit about it. So JMU not eligible to make the Sun Belt Championship. Do you have the numbers of if they were eligible by chance? Because I think it'd be really interesting to see JMU's championship likelihood if they were eligible. If not, we can just kind of focus on the game itself and how it plays in for Georgia Southern.
I do have that. Give me 1 second, guys. A JMU fan actually asked me that yesterday, and I went ahead and did the calculation. Okay, here it is. I found it. I said if JMU was eligible, JMU would currently have a 35% chance to make the Sun Belt Championship game. I'd have a 35% chance that the Dukes would win the East. If I look at I don't have their leverage. I didn't run the leverage piece. But if I look at the projected conference standings right now up on the website, James Madison, I said you guys are power rated number 62. If you look at teams in the Sun Belt, you're right up there with the best of the Sun Belt teams in a power rating standpoint. You're the best, most deserving by a good margin. But from a power rating standpoint, I have South Alabama out of the West at 56. I have Troy out of the West at number 60. And then in the East, James Madison's at 62 and Georgia Southern's number 63. Those are the top four teams in the Sun Belt by my power ratings right now. So James Madison is the best team in the East, one of the best teams in the conference, and their average projected conference wins is 5.7. That's actually best in the conference. 5.5 for Georgia Southern in the East with them, and then in the West, Troy has 5.6 and South Alabama has 5.3. So JMU, it truly is a shame that you guys are ineligible for the conference championship. I work in college athletics. I understand the transition rules. I understand why we have them in place. It's still unfortunate for the Dukes because I do think you guys are a really good team this year, and you're coming off of a year in which you guys had a ton of success, way more than my model thought you were going to have in year one. I learned a lot from JMU in 2022 that I was able to apply to new FBS newcomers this year, Sam Houston and Jacksonville State. Of course, we get Kennesaw State next year too. So every year I'm learning a little bit more about how to deal with these FCS to FBS transition teams, but the Dukes have handled it as well as anyone, and I can't imagine anyone else handling it better in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Gosh, you said South Alabama was ranked 56th, you said in your perspective model?
In the power ratings, yeah, their
Gotcha.
power rating rank is 56. That's correct.
Gotcha. That Oklahoma State win carries a lot then, I'd guess. That was a 33-7 beatdown for them.
Yeah, South Alabama's power rating. So on the website, k4ratings.com, I have all these team dashboards for everybody, and I keep track, and it's posted there every single week on the dashboard. You can see what was my team power rated, what was our most deserving ranking, all the different things I've talked about. It's tracked on there week by week. So if I look at South Alabama's dashboard, they came into the year number 69 in the power ratings. They were number 80 going into the Oklahoma State game. Coming out of that, they jumped to number 63. So they did experience a nice bump after that. Now they're up to number 56, so they've risen another half point since then. So yeah, that was certainly good for South Alabama. Now I don't think Oklahoma State is quite the team that we thought they were at that time. I think I had them power rated number 46 at the time of that game. They've now fallen to 55. So still a good team. And if they played again, Oklahoma State would be the favorite. That's another thing people get mad about. They say, well, wait, this team's already played. How do you have one above the other? So, well, I mean, guys, it's sports, right? If you play the game 100 times, you're not going to get the same result. So I don't know. It's a fun thing that I hear about every single week. So yes, South Alabama, though, really good team for Sun Belt standards by my numbers. They're number 69 in the most deserving rankings, though. At 3-3, the average top 25 team would certainly be expected to be better than that against their schedule.
That's awesome. Gotcha. So before we let you get up on out of here, we appreciate all the time. Go ahead and plug away with everything that you have, because I think JMU fans will absolutely love where they can find all this information. But I know your model, looking at the JMU dashboard now, JMU, according to your numbers, a 58% chance to win this Saturday against Georgia Southern. They're a 2.5-point favorite, according to your line. If you were a betting man, are you picking Georgia Southern to cover, or do you blindly go with your model?
What is the Vegas line? I don't even know.
I think it's 3.5 the last time I checked.
James Madison minus 3.5.
Yeah.
So my model, I have to be very clear here. I mentioned I work in college athletics. Because of that, I am not permitted by NCAA rules to place any wagers on any sporting event in a sport that the NCAA sponsors. So college football, NFL, anything basketball, soccer, I mean, all that stuff's out of the picture for me. And I'm okay with that. Sports betting prior to working in college athletics, I went to Vegas a couple times with some friends and would do that. Like it takes kind of the fun out of the game for me, because I'm sweating it and I'm trying to. I don't even want to deal with that, even if I didn't work in college athletics. But I don't do it because I do work in college athletics. If you were to use my numbers based on what's on the website and what you just told me about the Vegas line, my numbers would suggest that you would take Georgia Southern to cover, because the Vegas line's 3.5. My numbers say it should be 2.5. So I would take Georgia Southern to cover, but with there's a 1-point difference there, not a ton of value. Now it does cross a pretty important number of 3. So sports bettors could look at that one of a couple ways, but I do think James Madison wins this game outright. Like you said, 58% chance to get it done. So listen, we get teams that lose games as 58% win expectancies all the time. You go back to, I think the biggest quote upset by my numbers this year might actually have been in week 1 when Texas State beat Baylor. I think I had a 3% win expectancy for Texas State, and people are like, oh, see, well, your model can't call that. You didn't think they'd win. Well, I said, well, actually, the best thing about working with predictive analytics and probabilities is I actually said there was a 3% chance that Texas State would win, and they did. So
I'm right.
you can never technically be wrong when you deal with probabilities, which is probably my favorite thing of everything that I'm doing in terms of me being able to defend myself, because it's so fun when people say, you were wrong. See, you didn't think this would happen. Well, I actually did think this would happen 28% of the time or whatever. So that's another way that I like to flip things around too, guys, is like right now, if you look at my chances to make the CFP, or earlier this year, I'd say, Texas has a 35% chance to make the CFP. And I'm just making up numbers right now, but everyone on Twitter would be like, there's no way. Texas is always overrated. You guys keep saying now they have, top 4 chance to make it. I like to flip that around and say, yeah, my number suggests there's a 35% chance Texas makes the CFP. Guys, that means there's a 65% chance that Texas doesn't. So it's more likely than not that Texas will not make the CFP. So that's another way to kind of flip the probabilities around, because when people see any ranking, they immediately just freak out about whatever it is. So you have to be very intentional about what you say, how you say it, and how you present the data, I've learned. But I think I'm on a tangent. I don't even remember where I was going. JMU minus 2.5, 58% win expectancy. I will say before I get out of here for you guys, if you look also on the Sunbelt team dashboard kind of page and you're scrolling through, that's where you get to the JMU page too. At the beginning, you've got the projected conference standings, you've got the conference championship game leverage. You also have the projected point spreads. That's an important one to look at for JMU fans, because right now, by my numbers, there's 7 games left, counting this weekend. My numbers do not project JMU to have less than a 50% win expectancy in any of their remaining games. You guys are a favorite or a pick 'em with a 50+% win expectancy in every single game. But 3 of those games, you're projected as a favorite by a field goal or less. Those are toss-ups. And 2 more, you're projected by a favorite between a field goal and a touchdown. So of your 7 remaining games, you're a favorite in all of them, or a pick 'em with a greater than 50% win expectancy. But 5 of those are projected as 1-score games. So you guys say you're the cardiac kids. You say you do this all the time. Well, I think there's some more of these games in your future as well. So just keep an eye on that. It's something to track for sure. But I've enjoyed being on with you guys. This was so much fun. Happy to talk JMU, Sunbelt, really anything college football anytime. You can find me on X at KFord Ratings. The website's kfordratings.com. And as you guys mentioned, it's on the graphic there. I'm over at thelines.com, doing a couple podcasts a week for them, doing a couple articles a week, just writing about, watchability ratings, which I didn't even really get into, and also compare and contrast my most deserving rankings with the AP poll. That's always fun as well. You can find those articles over at thelines.com.
Awesome. Appreciate the time so much. Learned a lot, and we're going to have you on then to talk watchability later on in the season. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelly.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.
Of course. Man, I love
some stats. I loved it. Every second of it.
Yeah, you get me on a tangent about advanced stats and probability and expected. That's what I love about sports. And I will say,
to bully you about EPA.
No Bennett to bully me about EPA.
It's exactly. A life.
I can talk all about EPA I want. I will say the line's at a -6 now. JMU is a 6-point favorite. I don't know where I got 3.5 from. I don't know, but going from one guess.
I say it may have opened closer to 3.5. I think it was at 3.5 or 4.5.
I'll do some research here, because that's some hefty line movement. I might be on Georgia Southern +6. But we'll get into that later. We'll go from one guess to another. We're bringing on Brian Stone now. Brian Stone at Watch the Stone on Twitter, /X, whatever you want to call it nowadays. He's a Georgia Southern writer for Underdog Dynasty on SB Nation as well. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, of course. So
Absolutely.
We wanted to get a little insight into the Georgia Southern side of things. So I guess, Daniel, do you want to kick it off with the first question and try and probe and see what's expected out of Georgia Southern this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. So coming into this weekend, you all have had a fantastic season. We wanted to ask, one, how you're feeling about this season so far, and what are your team's goals looking like compared to what you thought at the start of the season they might be?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a big thing was, and I'll kind of go back to last season a little bit. One thing last season is they fielded one of the worst defenses in the country. To be quite frank, I mean, rush defense. I think we finished the year third worst in the country in yardage, and it was very apparent. You go back and watch the Coastal Carolina game where the guy gets hurdled at the end of the game, and Coastal goes in and scores like right at the buzzer. Things like that were what kept this team from reaching their full potential. And so, I mean, last year I said multiple times, I said, if they had even fielded a country U.S. average defense, this would have been an 8-4, 9-3 football team with the offense that they had.
Yeah.
This year, it's a definite improvement on the defensive side of the ball. The offensive production is still there. They really haven't missed a beat with Davis Brin at quarterback instead of Kyle Van Treese. They're now 60th in the country, which is like dead middle as far as total yardage allowed on the defensive side of the ball. So they've sort of shored up what was the big issue last year. And again, the offense is still kind of humming even with that quarterback change. I mean, I think the goal is same as any other team in the East. It's to make the Sun Belt title game, and then you play the winner essentially of Troy, South Alabama at this point, and then you kind of figure it out from there. Troy's obviously the defending champs. They look like they've sort of rounded into form in recent weeks, but yeah, I mean, pretty positive overall. Like outside of the Wisconsin game, I mean, they've looked solid.
Yeah, you can say that again. Troy, in the last 8 quarters of football, has allowed 1 touchdown and 10 total points. So I'm very glad JMU faced off against the Trojans 3 weeks ago rather than 3 weeks from today.
They look like a buzzsaw on offense right now. Gunnar Watson has played phenomenally for them.
Yeah.
I also host like a Sun Belt centric podcast myself, and I looked it up. They're allowing 8.7 points to conference opponents through 3 games.
Oh, that's great! Wow, that's pretty good.
They're a buzzsaw right now on defense.
Man, I mean,
that JMU 16 is looking real nice right now.
Yeah, that is. I love that. I like how you discounted Arkansas State, Texas State, Louisiana over there in the West too. You said it's between Troy. I mean, I'm fully with you. I'm fully with you.
Louisiana might be a sleeper. I like them this year.
Believe me, we have a Louisiana guy on our show, and he's always talking up Zion Chris and all of those guys, and I totally understand it. Texas State let me down a little bit. I actually bet them like for real life this weekend, and thought, and then they just had the punt block. We talked about it on our podcast. Like, didn't kick a field goal going into halftime for some reason. Gave up 3 free points. There was just a lot that Texas State did wrong that sort of snowballed.
Yeah. Before we talk more about this game, I do want to rewind back to when Clay Helton first got to Statesboro, because this was a triple option team. Me and Daniel were talking about this a few minutes ago. This was a triple option team that was 30-33 the 5 years prior to Helton taking over. I know there was a really good double-digit win season in there, but there was also like a 2-10 season in there. So it was kind of a program that experienced some up and downs. They ran, I don't mean to be rude to triple option apologists, but they ran kind of an archaic style of offense. And then Clay Helton comes in. The first thing he does is go and gets Kyle Van Treese. And he goes, you know what, guys? Remember the triple option where we run it 75 times a game? We're going to now pass it 75 times a game, a complete 180. What was the fan reaction to that? And then what has made this transition? You never see a triple option team transition this fast.
Yeah, I mean, so one big thing was they didn't run the triple option like per se, right?
Okay.
Like going back to when Army coach Jeff Munkin was with the team, they ran the true like wishbone. I mean, that was like every play under center, every play is a fake to the fullback, and then we go from there. The offense that they had run under Willie Fritz, who's now the Tulane head coach, was more of like it was like an Oregon style, like Chip Kelly spread option. And honestly, it was a lot like what Coastal had been running under Jamie Chadwell. They obviously threw the ball way more than we did, but that was sort of the same idea. So Helton comes in and obviously the last year of Chad Lunsford being the coach was a disaster, right? Like he he essentially didn't
Yeah.
replace the quarterback position. He didn't recruit all that well. It kind of seemed like he had just been like, "Hey guys, I'm just throwing the towel in." Like that's kind of the vibe that he gave off. So Helton comes on, and there's a lot of the fan base that is really married to the wishbone, even the spread, just the option in general. So moving away from that is really hard, especially for the older side of the fan base that watched, the Paul Johnson, Irk Russell, triple option teams win these FCS national titles. That throwing the ball to them was like witchcraft. Like it was like, we don't do that here. That's not something we're interested in. Every time we've tried it, it's failed miserably. So we're not gonna do it. And so I was more optimistic because I felt like the offense needed to move into the 21st century. Like you can run the ball that much, but you have to have the threat of throwing the football, right? To exist in this day and age. So when he came in, I think what really took me off guard was Helton and offensive coordinator Brian Ellis came in and just totally changed the direction of the team. Honestly, with a lot of the personnel that was still there from the Chad Lunsford years where we didn't throw the football. So I was reading an interview actually before this season where someone asked Helton about the receiver position and said, "Did you know these guys like Caleb Hood, Derwin Burgess, like these receivers were going to be this productive when you came in?" And he was like, "No, I thought they were going to be like wide blockers. Like, and I wasn't expecting a whole lot. And I thought we would really struggle. And then guess what? We throw these guys the football a couple times a game and they can make things happen with it." So even he was kind of surprised by the results that he got from throwing the football as much as we did. Now, I will say there have been times in the last 2 years, and there have been specific instances where I do wish we would run the football a little more than we do. Like last year against Marshall, I believe Jalen White, who's our leading rusher, had like 100 yards rushing in the first quarter or something against Marshall, and I think he had 6 carries the rest of the game. So there's just things like that where it's like I think sometimes it goes too far one direction, and it sort of needs to be more in the middle for them to be as good as they possibly could be, because I think we have 2 good running backs, and I honestly think they're underutilized.
OJ Arnold is a beast.
Yeah, OJ Arnold's the other one, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I know best from the Georgia Southern offense. And considering that they have been a little underutilized this year, and we look at the matchup that JMU has, I think they're going to stay underutilized for another game.
Right.
That rush defense of James Madison compared to the passing offense that is Georgia Southern just shows it's 2 polar opposites for strengths of this team. So how do you feel confidence-wise of Davis Brin's ability to stretch out this JMU secondary, and what's your read on the JMU's defense and ability to be able to guard the pass, especially in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not underestimating JMU's defense by any means. Like, I honestly, last year for us, it was really an ebb and flow with the season. Like we started really hot, won a couple of games, hit a lull, and I honestly thought the JMU game last year was going to be part of that lull. So I didn't think they were going to. I was amazed by what Todd Centeio did last year, to be totally honest with you. So when we were going to play JMU last year, I was like, Georgia Southern really doesn't have a shot. Like their defense is so bad, like it's impossible to quantify to anybody who doesn't watch them on a weekly basis how bad they are. So when they came in and threw the football and scored 45 points, I was like, where has this team been all year? Like they beat Nebraska, but like Nebraska's looking to get rid of Scott Frost tomorrow. So like that's not. It was a good win, but it was not like, oh man, you can really hang your hat on this. But I think I am confident with them throwing the football. Davis Brin had one game against Wisconsin earlier this year that really sort of gave me a lot of pause. But the last couple weeks when he's played, Ball State, Coastal Carolina, those games, he's really cleaned it up, to be totally honest. And he's been bulletproof in those games. So I mean, like Daniel said, I'm sure the rushers probably are going to go back to being underutilized, but the Davis Brin and the pass catchers we have are just they're great. So and there's a lot of options. It's not just like one guy and then everybody else. It's like everybody contributes pretty much an equal amount. So it's just a lot a lot of pieces that you have to keep up with all at the same time.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it's gonna be a wild game on Saturday. For this game, well, here's a question. It sounds like you might be a little bit of a betting person. You're on Texas State last weekend. For this game, I'm not going to ask you your pick yet. We'll save that till the very end. But the total, what's the total set at? Probably around, I should have kept up my betting dashboard, probably around the 60s, I'd imagine.
58 and a half.
Are you taking the over or the under, and why on that point total?
So I think I would take the under. I think that
I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think JMU's defense is really good. So, I mean, I think that as the level of offensive production we typically see from Georgia Southern is going to be down a little bit. Like, they scored 38 points essentially in 2 quarters against Coastal last week. Like, Coastal's defense, as we've seen, they looked good last night against App State, but in previous weeks, it's not been all that. It's not been all that impressive. So I think JMU's defense is easily the best defense they've played all season, and I'm including Wisconsin in that, to be totally honest with you. And then if you guys still had Todd Centeio, I would take the over. McLeod is a little bit of a step down from what Todd Centeio did last year, where he was, runaway Sunbelt Player of the Year. And so that's mostly my reason is like, I think JMU's defense is going to do a good job of containing Georgia Southern on some of those drives that last time we played Coastal led to points. But also, I think you guys' offense is also going to take a step back from when it was, 45-38 last year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, with a high-scoring game, and you're saying that the under is going to hit, what are some of the defensive players that we should watch out for in this game as JMU fans looking to this Georgia Southern front seven as well as secondary?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's kind of like the old no-name defense. I can't remember the NFL team that they belong to, but
the Panthers, I think.
Yeah, like I would say at linebacker, Marquez Watson-Trent is a really good player for Georgia Southern.
Love that name.
Yeah,
that's a name.
I think he was second or third team all conference last year, but the defense was just such a tire fire that it was impossible to point out anybody on the team and go, that guy's playing really well, because it's like, if you're giving up 200 yards rushing a game, is anybody really playing all that well? So it was, he racked up a bunch of tackles, but it was kind of like empty calories. So it was whatever. Latrell Bullard is another guy on the defensive line who he came in as a freshman last year. I think he was 330 pounds and he played nose tackle. He was like 6'3", 330, and he was sort of part of the youth movement that hit the team defensively in the second half of the year, because we realized the defense was so bad that they just have to throw somebody out there. Let's try something else. Anybody, please. So a lot of those guys have now had a year to sort of marinate, work through camp and get better in the off season. And like I said, the rush defense isn't bottom 3 in the country anymore. So clearly it's gotten better.
Hang the banner, folks. Hang the banner.
It's a low bar to clear, but they have gotten better. So I do have to give them credit for that. So those are 2 guys, I think, especially in the front 7, that you have to be aware of.
Gotcha.
All right,
secondary is scary too, with how many picks they've had this year.
Yeah, I didn't really see, that was the other part of having such a bad run defense last year, is the secondary didn't get any credit for anything they did well, because they could stop a long pass on first down and then a running back could take it 30 yards on second down, and it didn't really matter what happened before that. So yeah, the secondary was pretty good, I would say, last year, but the front 7 was just such a mess that it was almost impossible to enjoy anything that the defense did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So before we let you go, plug away. The floor is yours to plug. But at the end of all the plugs, you got to let us know who you're picking. I have a feeling I know where you're going to go, but got to hear a little bit of the reasoning on why you pick who you pick.
Sure. So like I said at the top, I host a Sunbelt centric podcast. It is called Warm Weather Fans, a play on fair weather fans. We record and come out with an episode once a week where we talk about the previous week of games and then go into the next week from, both a a straight up game preview perspective, but also from a betting standpoint, we always make picks. I have a running tally of all of our records. We have 3 people on the show, so we do that as well. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Watch the Stone. That's my Twitter handle, and then Warm Weather Fans the show. It's just that's the Twitter handle on X or Twitter or whatever it's called this week. But then other than that, I think my pick, especially with the line movement, JMU's a 6-point favorite. I'm going to take Georgia Southern +6. I think either way that this game could end up, I think it's going to be about a field goal deficit. I just think that these teams, like when you look at it, are pretty evenly matched overall. Obviously, JMU's got this great defense. Georgia Southern's got this great offense. And I just think when you mesh those two things, like it's one of those, something's got to give, things that happens. So I just think they're fairly evenly matched. And again, if Todd Centeio was back under center for the Dukes, I wouldn't feel as confident about the +6, but McLeod is not quite what Centeio is. So I'm taking Georgia Southern +6, and honestly, the under 2. Like, I think this is going to be a 24-21, 27-24 type contest, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I love it.
Gotcha.
Thank you so much for your time, Brian, today, and look forward to keeping up with what your thoughts are throughout the game and everything on Twitter at Watch the Stone. Are you a Kanye Jay-Z fan? Did that stem from Watch the Throne?
I did love that album.
Great album, yeah.
It did come out when I was, I think, a sophomore in college. But I just liked the pun, and I had a friend of mine give me the all thumbs up and was like, "You got to go with that as your Twitter handle," because it used to just be Stone and then a bunch of a couple digits after, and he was like, "No, Watch the Stone is so much better."
Love it. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one. For some reference, I am a college sophomore now, and I don't think Watch the Throne has come out in a significant amount of time. But I'll not date him.
I think I was a freshman in high school, maybe middle school when that came out.
Gotcha.
I don't know when it actually came out. Great album though. Some
fantastic,
absolute bangers on that. So let's finish talking about Georgia Southern, because I think there's still some meat on the bone there. And then we'll move into some other stuff before we get up on out of here. And we'll have Ben Hofer on to talk some recruiting to wrap things up. But before we do all of that, I want to get your pick for this game. So we've gotten it from a few people. Well, what do you expect to happen Saturday?
I expect for this game to be a little more high scoring than what's been previously stated on this podcast. I think that especially Georgia Southern is going to give this JMU secondary some fits, and they're going to play better than I think they have the past couple of weeks, but they're not going to play the best that they may need to keep this on the under of 58.5.
Okay.
I can imagine that JMU is also going to have a big offensive day, considering that this front seven is not nearly as stout as some of the teams, especially the Western Sun Belt Division teams we've played recently. So with that being said, I think the Dukes can establish a ground game better than they have in recent weeks, which is, especially with the consistency of what Kurt Cignetti's been throwing out on the field in the second half. If the run game's working, who knows? We may actually score in the third quarter. Like it'd be pretty wild to see, but I think we have some viable offensive threats that allow this Georgia Southern defense to show its holes a little bit more than it has in the previous couple of weeks, because they've been really, really pass heavy. And the same happens when you pass a lot on practice. Your DBs are going to get a lot of work, and they've been showing that. They've caught, I think they've had 6 turnovers now in the past 2 games.
Wow.
And have really been impressing me with that secondary. But I think the run game for JMU is going to shine. Jordan McLeod is going to have a good day. And I believe the Dukes are going to win this. And I think they're also going to cover. I have the Dukes winning this by, I want to say, 10 points. I think it's going to be a touchdown and a field goal game. My score prediction, if you will, is going to be 34-24 JMU.
All right, I like it. I flip-flopped so much thinking about this game, and throughout this podcast, I've gone back and forth and back and forth. I'm looking now at the success rates that these two defenses have. Against the pass, Georgia Southern has allowed a 45.9% success rate, which is 116th in the nation. Mind you, there's only 133 teams. Against the run, they have a 41.8% success rate, which is tied for 93rd in the nation. Both very bad, meaning they give up you have successful play. So not only do they allow explosives, but they also allow non-explosives for you to march down the field and score on them. So I think JMU's offense will actually find its rhythm for a full 60 minutes. We'll see a full 4-quarter game, and then the Dukes will pull out a win. I right now, if you ask me right now at 7:55 p.m. Wednesday, December 11th, JMU covers. Ask me again tomorrow at the same time. I may have completely changed my mind. But
if this is down at Georgia Southern's place, I don't think the Dukes cover. I think that
You
home
think
crowd
Bridgeport-
advantage
yeah.
is really going to show. There's been a lot of talk about this game, especially coming off the bye week. If any of you follow JMU Barstool on Instagram, they're putting out a petition to get students to stay the whole game. There's been a lot of talk about this team, a lot of hype coming into this game from the students, and I think that that's going to prevail not only with the alumni but also just Harrisonburg itself. I think we're going to show up, show out, and make it loud.
I dig it. I think this game does mean a little more for JMU. Like I think they remember. We have a quote in News or Snooze coming up in a little bit, but I think it means more. Like I hate that cliche, but I think it actually does. Where the players feel like they let one get away last year, and they want to prove a point this year.
And I know plenty of people that are still upset that they ruined our top 25 streak.
Exactly.
So there's both sides of people, not fans and players, that are looking at this game going, I want them to beat the pulp out of the Georgia Southern Eagles, and I think that they have a good chance to do so.
And the Georgia State Panthers. I heard you start the Panthers. And the Georgia State Panthers in a couple of weeks. So
got to get there first. 1-0. 1-0 every
exactly.
week.
Yeah, 1-0. Yeah, you control the controllables. You dominate the line of scrimmage. You dominate the point of contact. Every coach cliche.
Special teams is good. Yeah, everything you can get.
We got to win all three phases. So we'll throw it on over to a little bit of a recruiting breakdown here in October as Ben Hofer, our recruiting coordinator, our recruiting guy, breaks down some of that. And then we will be back with News or Snooze and Overreaction Corner to wrap some things up.
Okay, here's how Miro works. See, it's amazing.
What's everyone doing at David's desk? Ever since marketing started using Miro's collaborative online whiteboard, he thinks all our other teams should sign up. Why? He says Miro's making his meetings disappear. And if every team gets on it, that means even less meetings. They're using Miro for brainstorms, mind maps, customer research.
So could we use Miro instead of having another 100 meetings for every round of feedback?
Yep. You can comment, react to ideas, even leave a recording on the board.
And what about presentations?
There are Miro templates for that.
How do you know so much about Miro?
I've actually been using it all along. I just used a Miro board to plan the best vacation.
Okay, I'm on board.
See how Miro users save up to 80 hours every year by meeting less and doing more. Get on board at Miro.com with 3 boards free forever. That's MIRO.com.
Welcome to the future of legal THC. Mood's THCA flower. It's the most potent breakthrough in the world of federally legal cannabis. And now you have 10 high-inducing strains of this smokable flower to choose from at HelloMood.com, the best online dispensary that ships discreetly to your door. Great for beginner and veteran users, the experts at Mood have tailored different strains for curated moods. From euphoric and energized to creative and focused, Mood delivers the highest quality THC products you can trust. However you like to take THC, Mood enhances awe-inspiring experiences with versatile products that go with whatever mood you're ready for, like their great-tasting gummies, convenient pre-rolls, classic flower, and so much more. Try Mood's new THCA flower today. And for 20% off your first order, plus a free pre-roll of THCA flower, go to HelloMood.com and use promo code PODCAST20. That's HelloMood.com, promo code PODCAST20 for 20% off your order and a free THCA pre-roll.
We're joined now by Ben Hofer, our recruiting guy. You can follow him at probably 15 different @ on Twitter or Instagram. I swear he's coming up with a new one each and every day. But Ben, currently at Dukes Recruits. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. And I only have two.
Don't you also have 2 on Instagram though?
Okay. On Instagram, that's a different story. Yeah, we could get up to 15 there for sure. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So a lot. So we're talking multiple ads, just to start this off and give you a hard time. But you were at JMU last year. You worked with the video team, so you got some connections with JMU football. You love JMU football that way. So I know how you got into the whole JMU Nation-esque of it. But before we dive into kind of the recruiting class that is upcoming and what JMU fans can expect out of some of these, what you've really hyped them up to me. I've never really been into the recruiting side of it, but now I'm all in on them. How did you get into this love of recruiting that you have?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's the future, right? I love JMU and I want to see them succeed. And the best way to succeed is to bring in more talent, especially jumping up to the FBS level. And I mean, it's just good to follow the guys that are going to be coming in and making an impact. Almost some of them immediately. We'll get into that though, for sure.
Yeah. So what can JMU fans expect out of this upcoming class? I know they have a few guys you spotlighted, but overall, what has JMU really targeted so far and what their commitments have been? And what can JMU fans expect out of those commitments?
Well, in general, this is one of the highest rated recruiting classes in JMU history. We have multiple guys that are in the top 10 of highest rated individual players. But in this recruiting class, it started off very hot in the summer, as we remember. A lot of defense. We're looking to bolster that defense for next year. We are still missing a couple playmakers, you could say, on offense, but this is a very defensive heavy class, very highly recruited, bunch of 3-stars, much more than we're used to seeing. So it's a lot of talent coming in, a lot of talent on the defense so far, and hopefully closer to December and early signing day, we'll get some on offense as well.
Well, there's one guy, I guess he's both offense and defense, Chase Regan. He's, I think, in his recruiting profile is listed as an athlete or one of those ATHs, but he plays a little receiver. He plays a little DB. He's out of Bishop McDivitt. That's probably the wrong pronunciation, knowing myself. Bishop McDivitt High School in Pennsylvania. You've made him seem like a real stud. Like this guy can come in and make an immediate impact. And we haven't seen a lot of true freshmen make immediate impacts underneath Kurt Signetti. What have you seen out of his game that makes you so excited about Regan coming to the Valley?
Well, this is a different type of guy than we're used to seeing at JMU. This is a guy who has genuinely elite speed. I'm not sure if I can remember a guy who has had this level of speed that Chase Regan has. For context, he ran a 4.2840 at a Duke recruiting camp last summer, and he plays both sides of the ball. He's a safety, DB, and he plays wide receiver for his high school. He tells me that he is mainly a safety and that he enjoys defense more, but I'm hoping personally that we can put him in to some jet sweep situations, some special packages on offense for him to show off that talent. And he could potentially, with any of these guys, you never know what's going to happen, but he could make an impact next year.
Big time. That's you're making me think of Travis Hunter there, the way you broke down the defensive back, the wide receiver. Maybe JMU gets one of their own little two-way players who plays 100 snaps in a single game against TCU. Who knows? It might happen. But also offensively, there's a kid coming up, a 3-star quarterback, Alberto Mendoza, I believe his name is. You've grinded the tape. There's a video coming out on our YouTube here shortly about kind of what Mendoza is able to do. This is probably, I think, if memory serves, he'd be the second 3rd-star quarterback recruited underneath Kurt Signetti. The first would have been Alonzo Barnett, but Mendoza comes in. He's part of the not same recruiting class, but he was part of the same recruiting visit, was it, that Duke, the defensive player, was part of, and they kind of had a little bit of a connection. But Mendoza, do you kind of think he might be getting some starting reps in 12 months?
Well, I'd like to think so. I'd like to hope so, for sure. He is also kind of a different, this whole class is made up of kind of a different caliber of player than we've seen in previous years. This is the first recruiting class where FBS is being pitched and bowl eligibility is being pitched to these recruits. And so Alberto Mendoza is not only a 3-star, but he also plays in Florida for an undefeated team who went undefeated last year and won the state championship. He threw for something like 3,800 yards, bunch of touchdowns, not that many interceptions. Wow. So this is a guy that's coming in that's playing really good competition in Miami, in the Miami and the Central Florida areas. And that is what makes me think that he could potentially be a difference maker on offense. I'm not saying he's going to start in year one, but there's definitely potential there. And when you look at the school that he goes to, is Columbus High School in Miami, he really brings like a winning mentality and a winning culture from his previous high school that he's going to bring straight into JMU. And I just expect that to translate very well in terms of he could be competitive in a QB battle next year. Who knows what that's going to look like, but I expect him to come in and potentially vie for a starting spot.
No, I think the opportunity for him will be there. We've seen Cignetti, although Barnett didn't work out or has yet to work out, maybe there's still a question mark on the end of that sentence rather than a period. Barnett had the opportunity as a redshirt freshman, would have been the only freshman / redshirt freshman to start out of all the teams that were ranked a year ago. Unfortunately, that kind of hit a little bit of a road bump, but Cignetti's not afraid to give these guys opportunities. Atkins was fighting for the starting job a year ago. Cole Johnson was fighting year in and year out when Cignetti got here for the starting job, eventually won it. So I like the way you think there is potential that he could be vying for the starting job, but you touched on it, that there's this recruiting pitch. JMU has been FCS for so long. They finally get to FBS. They haven't really been able to pitch bowl eligibility yet. They haven't really been able to tap into, dare I say, the college football playoff all that much. You go over what you heard out of kids, what that recruiting pitch kind of is from the Dukes, what Curt Cignetti, what the recruiting staff is doing to get some of these kids over, what their pitch is to the student athletes.
Yeah, so I've talked to a number of the recruits by now, and a lot of the recruiting pitch that I've heard is a very positive one. It sounds like a lot of these kids who have Power 5 offers go to these Power 5 official visits, and some of them don't even talk to the head coach a lot of times, which I find to be kind of crazy, to be honest with you a little bit. But when they come to JMU, they tell me that they feel like they're wanted. They feel special, that the coaches are giving them attention and that they're really pitching to them that they want them to come here. And then obviously the recruits know it, but the coaches also say is that, look, we're playing at a higher level now. We're playing at the top level of the Sun Belt in our first 2 years. And that potentially, obviously, bowl eligibility, and then potentially in 2024, the college football national championship, always out there. It's always out there.
You can dangle that out like a little carrot. I mean, there is the potential, if you are playing at the top end of the Sun Belt, you're positioning yourself for a very solid chance to be the top group of 5 team. With all of this realignment, it hasn't impacted the expanded college football playoff. So it's not far-fetched to say that in the next 10 years, JMU will be in the college football playoff at least once. I don't think that's a crazy thought to have. And the fact that you can dangle that in front of these student athletes, get them to come and get them to kind of fight for that opportunity, it is really exciting.
The other thing is that this recruiting class, they kind of also understand that this is a special class, that this is the first one where there's this elite kind of talent coming in, or multiple 3-stars, much more than we've seen in the past. And they want to be together and make an impact. They want to push for something like a bowl or something even like the playoff in 2024.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first class that has been recruited fully FBS. So 2 years ago, it was FCS recruits being recruited by an FCS school. Last year's recruits would be FBS recruits, but some of them probably had their recruiting start while JMU was still an FCS school. So they may have been kind of being looked at as maybe more of an FCS talent. That's no slight against them. A lot of them have come in and made amazing impacts, but this should be the first one. Maybe next year is fully 100%, but this one's probably 90% been recruited since JMU has been FBS.
Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, we've got a lot of FCS products who have gone on to be undrafted free agents who get picked up by some teams. And it just shows that we have the coaches that can take any level of talent and up their game essentially. And so that's why it's especially exciting and important for this class to be the first one that is of FBS recruits to be an elite class and to see where we can go with them. Because if we can produce a product on the field with these recruits next year and some of them make an immediate impact, that will definitely help our recruiting classes in the future as well.
Yeah, I love it. So you talked a lot about the defensive side when we started. That's where a lot of the focus was during the summer. A lot of the focus was early on, but now as we get closer and closer to National Signing Day and all of that fun stuff later on in the year, they're kind of shifting the focus more to offense. But on the defensive side of the ball, who else should JMU fans be on the lookout for? Who can they expect to hear, over the PA at Bridgeforth Stadium making their third sack of the night? Who can they expect to hear that in the next 24 or so months?
Well, it's hard to tell who's going to make the immediate impact. I mean, we've seen Aiden Fisher come in as an underclassman, and we've seen D'Angelo Pons and some of these guys come in out of nowhere, seemingly. It's going to be tough to see who's going to come in and actually make that impact. But I always like kids that come from states that have high competition, such as Florida, Georgia, Texas. And one of those Georgia guys is Bryson Banks. He's from Buford High School. And I just think that he has all the physical tools to come in and potentially be a dominating force on our defense.
Notice that you left Virginia off of that, and I'm a little offended. The 757 represent. They got some great athletes. No, but I see entirely what you're saying. If Florida and Texas, specifically Georgia too, but Florida and Texas are different beasts when it comes to high school football. I mean, I thought Friday night lights were a big thing where I grew up in Virginia, and then you see the videos of Texas, and you're like, oh, so they're playing in a nicer stadium than Sam Houston. That's cool, dope.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it hardly feels like high school ball down there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that not only is everything bigger in Texas and Georgia and Florida, but they care more too. I mean, they've got the facilities, they've got to train, to play in the fans. There's a lot more expectation, a lot more pressure. And so, in my opinion, that leads to some early competition in college.
Yeah. That's a great point. They know what the spotlight is. They're prepared for it. They're ready to. You playing in front of 25,000 is only 5,000 more than what they were already playing in front of, rather than 25,000 more than what they were playing in front of. If you're coming from the hills of Virginia or some West Virginia town, or no offense to those towns, just they don't have the pure population to pack a stadium. But Ben. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Let the people know where they can follow along with your recruiting journey on Twitter and wherever else you want to plug.
Yeah, so you can find me at Dukes Recruits on Twitter. I do not have an Instagram right now, but on Twitter, you can follow me for some fun tweets related to recruiting most of the time. I will have more interviews dropping until National Signing Day. And obviously, we're going to keep a close eye on who sticks in this recruiting class and who potentially won't, until we get some signed on the dotted line.
Yeah, I was going to say, until it's pen to paper, we may see a couple flips. We've already seen it happen a few times in this FBS era.
I'm still sad about Jarvis Green flipping to Clemson. I mean, that guy, he's already playing as a freshman at Clemson. Imagine what he would have done at JMU.
Yeah, that's probably why he flipped to Clemson, though. Let's be honest. To contend for the ACC and actual national championships within his 4 years, he could have come to JMU, laid the foundation, and we can rah around that. But I understand why he went to Clemson. I get it. It was really funny though with him, how he was actively like pining for Clemson, where like he verbally committed to JMU, and he was like, but if Clemson offered, they are my dream school. So I wouldn't say no. It's like, all right, kid, no shame. I would have done the same thing. Probably wouldn't have been as outspoken about it, but I love it. But thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time and following along. And you also said your Twitters is all recruiting. You take the occasional shot at Liberty. So if you want the occasional shot at Liberty, which is 100% warranted, follow along with Duke's Recruits. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome stuff from Ben. Can't hear you, Jack.
There we go.
That'll do it.
And does that happen to me every time? Yes, it does. But I was going to say I've never really gotten into recruiting, so I'm glad Ben can pick up that mantle because I like what they do during the 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 years, depending on COVID. They do at JMU. I never really get into it too much watching like the huddle tape. So I'm glad he finds the enjoyment in that.
Yeah, also very exciting. Ben is going to be coming up for the ODU game, and we're planning on doing some on-campus content, some game day questions with the fans and the tailgating lots. So look out for us on ODU. I believe that's homecoming weekend.
It is.
We will be out and about and asking you some questions from JMU Sports News.
What a plug. But will you guys be taking a dip in Newman Lake?
No, I don't think we will. However, I think some of you may have seen this on my Twitter recently.
Yeah, how does this happen? What urged you to jump into Newman Lake?
So allegedly, there may have been some liquids that were involved, and I decided that in the November of my freshman year, it was going to be really, really fun in about 40-degree weather at midnight to do a belly flop into Newman Lake. And you all know where the new E-gate is supposed to let people in. I was right next to that bridge. Just did a nice little plunge from sorority row, allegedly. So
where did you live freshman year?
I lived in Hillside Hall, so I had to walk across up.
That was a trek.
Yeah, it was in front of the Union down near where they have. I think it's Duke's Dining over there. It's one of the newer buildings, and then I was at Hillside and cold. But we made it back.
All right. So that brings us into arguably the best portion because I guess there's no clean segue to this. I was going to try and bring Newman Lake into overreactions. But we got some overreactions from the bye week.
We're jumping.
Are you ready for these?
Conclusions. Jumping into the lake, jumping to conclusions, whatever it may be. But this overreaction corner is going to start off with a quote. Jack?
Boom. Well, look at that segue. King of segues. Still lots of – this is from Randy. This is a long one. We're getting the long one out of the way first. Still lots of room for improvement, which is very positive. The secondary is improving weekly. McLeod is getting more comfortable each week but needs to run the ball more. Too many times we're handing the ball off up the middle for little or no gain when it appears he could easily keep it and beat the defense to the edge. Daniel, what are your thoughts on Randy's overreaction?
I think that Randy's overreaction has a lot of merit. And one of the things that while I was watching the Wisconsin versus Georgia Southern game, Wisconsin, was that who they played this year?
Yes.
Them in Nebraska. I mixed up the two red teams.
I do too all the time. I had to triple check today to make sure I got it right. Yes, it was Wisconsin this year. They beat Nebraska last year.
Excellent. When they were playing against Wisconsin, the quarterback for them, Mordecai, had several really clean rushing plays. He ended up scoring 2 rushing touchdowns on the day of just pulling the ball and taking it right into the end zone after either a fake handoff, an option, a designed run. There was a couple of different segments of where he was really dicing that Georgia Southern front seven up. And I think that McLeod has the opportunity to do the same throughout the entire Sun Belt East. His legs have impressed me, especially this past game against South Alabama. Ripped off 67 yards, was the team's highest average rusher. And that includes Kalon, that includes Tyson. So to see his legs get more utilized in this offense, I would be ecstatic. And yes, we do have room for improvement for sure.
Next one from Will Burns. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm not good with them. Jordan McLeod is a baller, and I don't understand the negative buzz. I trust him slinging the rock. He's elusive and one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the Sun Belt. Will, I love Jordan McLeod. I'm going to say pump the brakes a little bit. I think McLeod has a lot of room for improvement. I think he's really good, and I think he has a ton of potential. He's still getting comfortable, and the third quarter is an issue he has to overcome. And that third quarter, I think, is so bad that it warrants some of that negative buzz.
I think the third quarter is really the downer on Jordan's quote-unquote legacy, I guess, as you could put it so far through 5 games. He just has not come out sharp in the second half, and that ability to just lay a duck, like an absolute goose egg in the third quarter it's terrifying for this team's offense when you're completely taken out of the game in the second 30 minutes and maybe you get some fourth quarter action here and there. Maybe your team has to put the ball in your hands to actually win the game now. It's not a good look. Cignetti had a quote earlier within this season about seeing some scary things in that pass game. I believe it was in the post game in South Alabama. You don't
Yeah.
say there's scary things in the passing game with a quarterback that you 100% trust. It's just not going to be there.
I agree. Also, this is from, I misspelled his last name. That is so awkward. Also, we're winning out and we'll be the first team in history to be undefeated and not be able to play in a bowl. According to Kelly Ford, that's only a 96% overreaction.
Honestly, I can see it. Now, Ben has a great take here, and while it is a bit of a homer homer take, I think if they can get to 7-0, they're more likely to go undefeated than they are to lose 2 games.
Yes.
Maybe that's a little bit of, I don't think that's a hot take though. I mean, the last half of their schedule in comparison to the gauntlet they just went
Yes.
through and the 2 games upcoming, 2 of the toughest teams in the Sun Belt East, it's definitely going to have some major implications if they can come out of this undefeated still. And I think 12-0, as cool as it may be, we're still probably not going to make it to the conference championship, if I'm being honest.
Well, according
It's
to
not
this,
looking great.
According to this overreaction, 12-0 is going to happen. But we just touched on that. This team could legitimately end up being 7-5 after starting 5-0. They have to get the secondary and the QB position figured out. When you have 1:30 left in the first half and 2 timeouts, try to get the ball downfield and put more points on the board for Lord's sake. I will say, I think the secondary has started to kind of figure it out. I'm more worried about the second half play calling. South Alabama really made me not terrified of the defense.
I think that the take that this team could end up at 7-5 is, at least for my opinion, blasphemous. This team has not given us any reason to doubt them yet, as crazy as that sounds. I know that there's been plenty of doubt because of the margin of victory, because of the way that we let some of these teams back in, the secondary. You can go on and on and on. They're 5-0 against the toughest schedule in JMU history so far. I mean, you took the two toughest teams in the Sun Belt West. You bring in as well a Power 5 in Virginia, who's still Power 5. Doesn't matter if they're 1-5. Like, there's quality to their wins, and I think that the quarterback position is getting figured out currently. McLeod has been a top half Sun Belt quarterback. He's played well, and the secondary is getting better. Coach Cignetti spoke to it to me when I asked him, with these young players, do you see improvement? And he said, our pass defense is improving, and it has to continue to keep improving. He understands that. This team understands that. And I don't see why there's going to be any reason why it won't improve the way that they expect it to, at least marginally.
I agree wholeheartedly. Or maybe not wholeheartedly. I agree 75% heartedly. Every week I go into it very scared. This week it's still that. And then quarter 1, when they give up 1 5-yard run, I'm going to be pissed. And that's just how I watch games. I watch games from a very negative perspective, and that's probably not healthy for my blood pressure and heart, but we make it through. That brings us to this week's News or Snooze, presented by Christopher William Jewelers. I'm going to give Daniel 3 quotes. We got 3 good quotes from 3 different people. He's going to tell me if they're newsworthy or snoozeworthy. We're going to start with a quote from Tyson Lawton from his media availability. I believe it was either yesterday or today. And the pauses in this were just absolutely electric. The quote is, we just got to make sure, and this was a question from Shane Metlin about third downs. His quote, we just got to make sure we run the ball harder and we call the right plays to be successful. Pause. And just pause. Pause. Yeah, we just got to run harder on first and second down. Newsworthy or snoozeworthy?
It's almost a combination. I'm going to have to say snoozeworthy because he's saying what we're all thinking. I mean, it's a little snoozy because I feel like we've all slept on it for 3 weeks now. It's the same stuff. It's okay, if you're going to run on first and second, make them good, make them explosive runs, make them 5 yards or more so your pass game isn't completely stranded out to dry. And then if you're not going to do that in the third and fourth quarter, pass the ball maybe and try and keep trying and not just give up after 3 attempts. Like, I'm going to say snooze simply because I think it's a general consensus, but it's news for a player on the team to be saying what we're thinking.
Yeah. The pauses in that were just out. His
golden.
He clearly was thinking, I want to say we have to call better plays and we have to give more faith to Jordan McLeod, but I can't say that because I'm a fifth-year senior and I know what would happen if I said that.
Yes.
Absolutely
That is
electric.
why you give the fifth years and the experienced guys media availability.
Yep, 100%. That's why a lot of coaches have Mike Houston. I don't know if Signetti has this rule, but Mike Houston did not allow any freshman to talk to the media, no matter if they were the starting quarterback or the kid with 4 interceptions in a game. A freshman could never talk to the media. Jamry Croma. This was a quote talking about last year's Georgia Southern game. Even though we lost, in other people's eyes, they beat us. But I feel like as a team, we really beat ourselves. Newsworthy or snoozeworthy?
Newsworthy. I think that quote shows from Jamry personally a lot of maturity to understand that this game that they played against Georgia Southern last year wasn't their best showing.
Yeah.
I think that they had a lot of times of them, frankly, getting stonewalled by that offensive line. The defensive line did not, especially in the second half, create the havoc that it could have and, in my opinion, should have. And that left the secondary out to dry. And when you put Caleb Hood, when you put Derwin Burgess in those one-on-ones, they're going to win a lot of the time. In that game, Kyle Van Treese could not miss a ball. I mean, I remember watching this game live, and every single throw in the third and fourth quarter felt like a backbreaker because you're like, oh, are they going to get one? Oh, are they going to get one? Is a hand going to go up? Maybe. No, just in the bucket, straight over the top, over the shoulders, spectacular catches. Guys jumping over the top of safeties too. I mean, they really got both beat by that team, but also I think the crowd got into it to the point where they beat themselves. They didn't have the effort that they needed to, and it showed when Todd had an off day, the team had an off day.
Yeah. A lot of penalties that game. 4 turnovers from JMU against Southern in Statesboro last year. And a blocked punt that was returned for a touchdown.
That was huge for momentum, too. That blocked punt turned the game around.
Kind of like the UVA game for JMU earlier this year. Like when it's that close, when the margins are so small, special teams comes into it. And then last but certainly not least, we have head coach Curt Signetti with this amazing quote talking about Georgia Southern's electric third down conversion rates. Right now, anything that has to do with a 3 with our team isn't so great. Last 3 weeks, we are 19% on third down on offense, and I think we've scored 3 points in the third quarter is what he was referring to with the 3 points. Newsworthy or snoozeworthy?
Guess what? Newsworthy. Yes. The threes have haunted JMU this year. The third downs, the third quarters have been just appalling as a fan. You really can't sit back and watch this team in the second half and go, yeah, that's good ball. We're getting our butts kicked for 15 minutes of the game consistently every game.
Yep.
That's not going to lead to as many wins as you expect. And it's so weird because this team, especially last year, was a second half team, if anything else. You'd think about the Georgia State game where they come back and win after a massive deficit. And that game was decided in the second half primarily with Todd and with Percy and with Chris on that offense just humming through the second half and third quarters. So I really don't know what it is. I think that there's a combination of a bunch of things. We've talked about it ad nauseum. But I'm really excited to see the threes turn around and turn from threes on their side to threes on their bottom, which is W's.
That was smooth. I had to write that out myself. That was a good one.
Yeah.
So that's this week's news or snooze. That about wraps up this behemoth of a podcast. Daniel, thank you so much for taking about an hour and a half of your Wednesday night. I know you could have been studying, and I know that's what every JMU student wants to be doing on a Wednesday night, but really appreciate you taking the time, talking some JMU, talking some Georgia Southern, and helping me out with today's podcast.
Jack, it was a pleasure joining you this afternoon. I'm very glad I could fill in for Bennett Conlin's spot admirably. Hopefully I did a good enough job. I don't think I bullied you nearly enough. I got to work on that.
Yeah, we got to figure out where Bennett went. It was kind of rude of him just to leave us alone with the keys to the house and let us fend for ourselves. We really got to figure out where Bennett went and get him back for next week. But in the meantime, this has been the JMU Sports News Podcast presented by Bet Online. Leave a like, rate, subscribe, whatever it may be, wherever you find your podcasts. We are there. We'll be back next Wednesday. You can follow along with all of the happenings on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at JMU Sports News. Until next Wednesday, follow Daniel Merriman. He has a new ad. It's not Daniel TXFC, TFXC. It's not Daniel Merriman _ So check him out on Twitter. Thank you, Daniel. See ya.
See ya.
Today, we discuss Miro. Today, I want to talk about the hellscape that is technical diagramming, right? Everybody's nodding their heads right now, And there is a potential solution that I want to share. There was one name that several people brought up. I did some digging, and it's kind of nuts how much this program Miro has for developers. I have to share this. It could potentially be a game changer for you. So my favorite part about Miro is that half the work is already done. Like right now, typically we spend hours starting diagrams from scratch, gathering information. You get buy-in from every team. That's a lot of work to do. But Miro has a full set of integrations with the tools you're probably already using. And they also offer open APIs and SDKs for custom solutions for all those niche diagramming use cases we have to do, right? So the end result is the same, but it doesn't take forever. It's a massive, massive time saver. I'm transforming basic flowcharts and network architectures, and it all lives in one place. So are you using Miro? Have you used it? I want to hear. That's Miro.com.